this. And we're going to also listen to some of the music. David Sasso, welcome to Dateline New Haven. Welcome back. It's nice to see you.
Thanks, Paul. It's good to see you.
When you and Kat were here, was that before the pandemic? It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, it must have been.
So BP and AP before
That's right.
pandemic. So when they were in year 3 AP or whatever. So you put out this new album. Yeah, their inaugural concert last week. So as Kabbalat Shabbat is a service, means welcoming or the Sabbath bride. It comes out of a mystical tradition from the 16th century. Jews in Safed or Sfat, they would go up the mountain sometimes in robes to welcome, because when Shabbat comes, the Sabbath comes in Jewish tradition, we're really turning off the lights, we're turning off the work, we're turning off the week, and we're getting a taste of heaven. And that's that great moment when that change comes, right? Even if we're not climbing a mountain physically, I know I feel it Friday night, the change is coming in a different headspace. We're getting a little taste of heaven, Olam Haba, the world to come. And what gets us there sometimes is this service, Kabbalat Shabbat. It's these 6 psalms we sing and a couple of other prayers that are beautiful. And they've had, since the 16th century, lots of different melodies. And you just put a whole bunch of new melodies on them and recordings and bluegrass. What got this project started, David?
Well, I've been composing and singing and attending services and participating in Jewish music for really my whole life. My parents are both rabbis. So the liturgy and all of the different melodies, as you mentioned, these songs have been set to so many melodies across the years, have always been with me. And at some point, it wasn't really in the middle of the pandemic where there was so very little to do outside of your home. And I was sitting one night with the guitar, and I can't tell you what the particular inspiration was, but I thought to myself, let me see if I can write a Lecha Dodi. And I was
Lecha Dodi is sort of the climactic part. Yeah. It's not the last prayer we do, but we've built up Lecha Dodi, and there are all these versions different people choose. Sometimes it's a long enough psalm that often people do 2 different melodies. And you ever notice that, like halfway it pivots? Lecha Dodi, Lecha Kala. That's the sort of
and then you pick it up.
merry-go-round, the Lecha Dodi, Lecha Kala, Yai-da-da-da-da, Fnei Shabbat. You know, that's one of the ones we do, yeah. So you were sitting around saying, I got a new Lecha Dodi.
So, yeah, I've been playing bluegrass. I've been playing bluegrass for, I don't know, the past 8 years or so. I'm from Indiana, which is closer to the origins of bluegrass, but I actually found bluegrass here in Connecticut. My training before that was in classical music and classical composition, but I had been playing a lot of bluegrass and practicing during the pandemic, and I had my guitar out one night, and I sat down to try to write a Lecha Dodi, and as it sometimes happens, the words were there, I knew the words deeply, and the melody came out within the span of a few minutes, and I recorded it.
What kind of guitar were you playing?
That was my Martin D28. Yeah.
And the melody just came out.
The melody just came out.
Sort of like Elton John getting the lyrics and Bernie Taupin for your song, and in 2 minutes it was there, or like a Rolling Stone.
You know, when people say that, it sounds like it's some kind of magical inspiration.
No, I felt it. I'm not a great composer or anything, but I felt that we sit down and it just comes out.
Well, it comes out, but it comes out because, as I said, you know, how deeply you know the lyrics, how much it's been sort of bouncing around in your head, and all of the musical experiences and training and performances you've done sort of come together in a moment, and it feels like it is magic. It feels like magic.
So I feel like you're saying, David, it just comes out, and it doesn't just come out.
Exactly.
Because everything in music is the next step in a lifelong and generations-long sharing of ideas.
It's built on something, right?
Yeah. So what came out?
Well, that was the Lecha Dodi, which, you know, I think we're going to listen to later today. But I'll say that after I wrote that, it was so quick, I said, well, let me do another one. I pulled out the Siddur, the prayer book, and I went through, and of course, as Paul said, there's a number of psalms and other poems that exist in this portion of the Shabbat service, and went to another one. I don't honestly remember which one came next, but within the span of, I don't know, maybe 90 minutes, I had on my voice memos on my phone about 8 different songs.
Really?
Yeah. And
wow.
Some of them made the cut. Some of them got changed dramatically, but that was the beginning.
And they were all Kabbalat Shabbat.
They were all Kabbalat Shabbat.
Well, what point did you say, okay, got this first melody, got the second melody, I'm going on a Kabbalat Shabbat group? Was it a Friday?
I wish I could remember.
It was the pandemic.
If I look on my voice memos, I could probably tell you.
But in the pandemic, there were no days. Yeah. Remember, it was Blur's Day?
That's right.
Remember Blur's Day?
Yes.
But at what point did you say, David, it's always interesting to think about inspiration.
Yeah.
At what point do you say, "Ooh, I got something here with Kabbalat Shabbat"? Did you actually say, "Okay, now I'm going to look at the next psalm"?
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, once I got through a couple of them, I realized that there was something happening here, and went through the service. And honestly, I didn't restrict it to Kabbalat Shabbat. On the album, I think there are 2 tracks that are from later in the service: Hashkivenu, which is a prayer for evening rest, and Adon Olam, which is a hymn that is not strictly part of the Shabbat liturgy, but is often sung as a closing song.
Right, we at the end of Mariv, like Kabbalat
Yeah,
Shabbat, there's a second service, then we
That's
either
right.
end with Adon Olam or there are some other options too.
Right.
And then and even Shalom Aleichem, do we use? We don't usually say that at Kabbalat Shabbat. It's usually right before,
It's
when we go
before,
home and
technically.
sing, or the dinner before,
Or after.
But it's part of the vibe. It's
It's
part of the Friday night vibe.
Exactly.
Hashkivenu, I didn't even know people do that on Friday night. I've never heard anyone. I mean, maybe your dinner table.
Well, it's part of the Ma'ariv service, right?
Oh, right,
One of
right.
the prayers after
Hashkivenu,
the
Shalom,
Shabbat.
yes,
Yeah.
okay, got that.
Yeah.
Yep. So you knew something was happening here, and you went with it.
I went with it.
Sort of one of those pandemic moments.
But who knew where it was going to go? I mean, this was a couple of years ago, and it just sat on my iPhone for a long time. I'll thank my rabbi here, Rabbi Michael Farbman at Temple Emmanuel.
He's a musical
He's a
rabbi.
musical guy, plays the guitar, sings, fantastic services. And at some point when the pandemic was remitting and we were able to gather again for services, some of these songs we would play, in the synagogue here in Connecticut.
Well,
but
wait a
not-
second, but there's another step. Okay.
Yeah.
So you put the 8 on your iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
Did they just sit there, or did you continue to play them and revise them?
Yeah. I think I continued to add to them if inspiration struck, or revise them. And as I said, then bring a couple of them to the synagogue here.
So you
to see
did. So
what
in other
that
words, were
sounds
you
like.
constantly saying, if someone ran into you or talked to you, did you say, "Hey, David, what are you up to these days?" Did you just say, "I'm working on a project about Kabbalat Shabbat," or was it less formal than that? Every once in a while, you kind of tool around again.
Much less formal.
So then, when did you meet again at Temple Emmanuel?
Well, as you say, it's all blurry. Whenever it was that we started gathering again, Rabbi Farbman loves to incorporate music into the services, and sometimes we have when there's a 5th Shabbat, a 5th Friday night in a month, we'll gather in the round with the musicians of the synagogue and
Oh,
play
really?
together. And
That is such a great idea.
yeah.
Did that happen?
And so that happened a couple of times, and we do, a couple of these alongside all of the other well-known.
And do you say like
melody
everybody you can
makers.
bring something to lead? Is that the idea?
Yeah, we would. Well, not original songs. I mean, I
No, I mean like if you say I got a new tune, did you say, Rabbi Farman, I want to bring a new tune?
Sure.
And did people sing with you?
Yeah.
This is great. We're talking to David Sasso, a wonderful bluegrass musician in town, who has this mind-blowing new project, a new CD out of songs he began working on during the pandemic with modern bluegrass takes on the psalms we sing mostly Friday night for the Kabbalat Shabbat service in Jewish tradition, welcoming the Sabbath. So, David, let's listen to one of these, if that's okay. Why don't we go with L'chad Odi?
Great.
Okay, we'll jump the order. This is L'chad Odi from David's new album.
L'chad Odi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. L'chad Odi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. B'nei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor v'dibur echad, השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתפילה.
לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה, וראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. l'chad odi לקראת כלה, בני שבת מקבלה, דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת לקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
We're listening to L'chado D, sung maybe since the 16th century. I'm not sure if this was among the first psalms or not. Maybe you would know, David. Reinterpreted in a new album by David Sasso, backed by a band, not his band, called Jacob's Ladder, reimagining the Friday night Kabbalat Shabbat service in Jewish tradition, welcoming the Sabbath. Now, I forget, did you say that was the first one you wrote on Blur's Day or the second?
I think that was the first.
L'cha was first. So this is beautiful. So you've been telling us how you, during the pandemic, came to bring bluegrass song music to traditional hymns that were never sung that way. You started out at Temple Emmanuel playing them there. How did you get from there to recording this album?
Well, about a year ago, well, for a little while now, I've known that I mentioned earlier that both of my parents are rabbis. They served the same synagogue in Indianapolis where I grew up since I was one. And my mother retired from the pulpit about 10 years ago. And my father just retired this past Friday, so I knew that was coming, and contacted the people in charge of the celebration of his retirement in Indianapolis, and proposed this idea of putting these pieces together in a much more formal way to dedicate to both of my parents and to my childhood synagogue, and perform in honor of his retirement.
And can you imagine I can just imagine the nachas of your father. Look at the kid I raised. Look how wonderful he is, and look how he's keeping our tradition going in new ways. I can't imagine
just what he
a greater
imagines.
gift to give your dad.
Bluegrass is exactly what he imagined. But
but when did you go about recording it? When did you say I want to make an album?
Yeah,
was that part of that?
That was part of the idea. So, in putting this together, I needed to find a band that both played bluegrass at a high level, which you can hear clearly in that recording that they do, but also
good.
that knew the tradition, the Hebrew and the liturgical tradition. And so I reached out to this group called Jacob's Ladder, formerly called Kol Kachol, in Boston. And these are young musicians who trained either at Berkeley. One of them is in school at New England Conservatory now. Their names are Ariel Weiner, who plays the mandolin and the guitar on the album.
We heard her singing on that track too.
No, Ariel is the guy.
Oh, okay.
And then Sophia Carandini is the woman who plays the fiddle and sings. And then we have G. Rockwell on banjo and some other instruments on the album, and Noah Harrington on the bass.
What kind of music do they usually do?
Well, they all came from a bluegrass tradition, instrumentally. And play in a number of other bluegrass bands. They all are intergenre musicians.
But how did the Jewish part come in?
Well, the Jewish part is most of them are Jewish.
Were they already playing Jewish music, or were you their first immersion?
This band, Jacob's Ladder, which you should all check out, does Jewish bluegrass also.
Oh, this?
They play bluegrass with existing bluegrass songs with Hebrew lyrics, or new songs that they compose. They have a new album coming out of their own soon. So they're deep into this, and they travel the country as well to synagogues and put together sort of Jewish liturgical experiences that are rooted in
So what did they
bluegrass.
say when you contacted them?
I think they were pretty excited about it.
So you went up to Boston.
Went up to Boston.
Studio, Danielson Studios?
This is Dimension Sound Studio
Dimension
in
Sound.
Boston, where I recorded the previous two albums with Cat Wallace. And
when did you do this?
this was in February. Putting them together, and we rehearsed on a Friday and spent a full day in the studio on Sunday. Got 7 tracks down, including video, and the videos will be coming out as well.
How long did it take you on Sunday?
I think we arrived at the studio at noon and probably left at, I don't know, 8 or 9.
And who shot the video? Was the videos are
We
very
had a
well shot.
Professional, videographer, and then Ariel who edited them.
And were you thinking this was going to be specifically for your parents' celebration in honor of that? So that's why you were doing it.
Definitely.
And why did you want to do this for your parents?
Well, mainly to honor them, right? To celebrate, help celebrate.
Kibbud Avim. Okay,
There you go. Yeah. Celebrate kind of all of their years as rabbis, and also to sort of give thanks to my synagogue, to kind of come home and bring a music that is, native to the Midwest and, around there. Bill Monroe being from, Indiana, and to add to the celebration. So, but it was also an opportunity to really put this down in a way that is, archived, so to speak. It exists now on CD. It exists on videos, and hopefully people like the melodies and will sing them.
I like them. So
in their synagogues.
your parents. So you grew up in a Reconstructionist synagogue, correct? Do
That's
you
right.
remember going to Kabbalat Shabbat? Was that the biggie?
Yeah, my parents both rabbis. I used to go to services pretty much every week, Friday night, Saturday morning.
Starting what age?
Before I can remember. Yeah.
Did you like Kabbalat Shabbat?
I liked it all. the
So I
melodies.
gotta tell you, that's always been my favorite part. We don't have a great one at the synagogue I go to now, but when there's a good Kabbalat Shabbat around, that's my favorite part of the week, hands down.
I loved the cantors that we had over the years, and the music probably the Jewish music that I heard as a child probably was the main inspiration to become a musician.
Oh, really? Jewish music was?
Yeah. It informs everything, that I do. I studied classical music, and I've written a lot of classical music on Jewish themes as well. But even when it doesn't have to do with Jewish music, I think that the kernel of it, the origin was hearing these, this music in a liturgical fashion, week after week.
And what do you remember about it? Do you have any memories of Kabbalat Shabbat, any specific time, like when you heard a certain melody sung a new way, or singing it on the way to shul, or hitting that moment? Because I sometimes hit a moment where I feel like it's that Friday moment, peace moment, where you feel you're lifted out of the ordinary of the hall into the sacred moment.
Well, there are these very, traditional is a difficult word, but there are these.
Traditional is like what I'm used to when I was a kid.
Traditional is what I know.
Yeah.
So, but there are these very traditional melodies that many people know of Kabbalat Shabbat. Many of them Carlbach melodies, and that are just, they really take you to a different place. Many of them can be sung with accompaniment, but they also work very well without accompaniment.
Yeah.
There's also this idea of songs without words. There's a very common musical, it's not really a form, but an approach in Judaism called a nigun.
Right, niganim are songs that you're chanting and not really doing the word. You say some syllables,
That's
right?
right,
It's
yeah.
usually yai dai dai, no?
Usually yai dai dai, bye bye bye, something like that.
Yai dai dai.
My,
And
my.
if you're sitting through a song, some of the people don't know it at the table. By the time it's built up and you're done with the regular words, you just do yai dai dai and you
That's
get real
right.
loud.
Yeah,
Did you have yai dai dais in your synagogue when you grew up?
Definitely. The idea of the nigun, the word nigun comes from the root in Hebrew, which also gives us the word negina, which means melody. And so I think the idea liturgically is that, prayer often is expressed in words, but there comes a time where the words do not express what it is that you fully want to say. So sometimes it's a nigun in and of itself, and that expresses some sort of hope or value or feeling. But oftentimes there'll be a song that you sing and you get through all of the words, but you still have more to express, and then it goes into a yai dai dai.
Isn't it sometimes it's used as a warm-up, especially for Sukkot Zimra, the warm-up, spiritual warm-up, Saturday mornings, people like do niganim to sort of
to
get you
warm
in the
up,
mood, to get
in
your
the mood.
soul in the place to sing with feeling.
Yeah, it's
So
very
when-
meditative.
And
yeah.
you have a nigun on this album to begin the Shalom Aleichem, which is the first prayer, not necessarily of Kabbalat Shabbat, but to greet the Sabbath. Shalom Aleichem, we say it at the Friday night table to welcome the Sabbath bride, manifestation of the divine on Sabbath. And what was your thinking in starting that with a nigun?
I didn't. That came later. I wrote the melody as it is on there, and then it just made sense that a nigun needed to open it and end it. And actually,
Why?
Why? Because as I just said, sometimes the words, when you've completed them, have not fully expressed whatever it is intangible that you want to say.
And a successful nigun is easy to learn. It has a tricky, unexpected detour at times where you're going to go musically, whether a different note that would normally not follow that note or something, but it takes you, it to kind of take you that extra place, but that you can really follow. Do you want to? We talked before in the air. Do you want to teach me this nigun,
Sure.
just so I can learn it, and then we'll play people the recording?
Sure, there are actually 2 niguns on this song to make it more complicated. There's one at the beginning that reappears, but then there's just the melody of the Shalom Aleichem, and that's what I'll sing.
Okay.
I'll sing the first verse of the Shalom Aleichem, and then we do it as a nigun. See if you can
Okay.
join in. If you're listening, please, you can join at home. So, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yai Dai 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 Dai, Yai Dai 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 Dai, Yai Dai 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 Dai, Yai Dai 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 Dai, Yai Dai 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 Dai, Yada Dai Dai, Yada Dai Dai.
That's great, Dave. So David Sasso was just telling us about a nigun, a melody he added to Shalom Aleichem on his new album he recorded with a band that's not his band called the Jacob's Ladder, reimagining, repositioning the Psalms that opened the Sabbath for Jews on Friday night in the service Kabbalat Shabbat. And now let's hear how they recorded what you just heard. Shalom Aleichem here on Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio.
Yai, 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 yada, yai, 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 yai,
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Boachem leshalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon, mimelech, malchei amlachim, hakadosh baruch hu.
Baruchuni l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon, mimelech, malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu.
Tzeitkhem leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yai, 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 yai,
You were just listening to Shalom Aleichem sung for centuries by Jews at the beginning of the Sabbath to bring in the welcome the Sabbath bride, but sung in a new way like you've never heard it before or played before, thanks to David Sasso on his new album Sasson V'Simcha, recorded with the Bluegrass band Jacob's Ladder, not his band, a band he would combined with to do this album. We're talking about his new album and his reinterpretation on WNHH FM's Dateline New Haven. So, David, we got the recording. It's February. Your father's retirement coming up in May. Tell me about the gig. That was last weekend. Did the band travel with you to Indianapolis?
Yeah, they did.
And what's the congregation?
So this is Congregation Bethel Tzedek. It's a congregation that's affiliated with the conservative movement and the Reconstructionist movement in Indianapolis. And
was that always true when you were growing up?
That's right. Yeah, the first rabbi of Bethel Tzedek was Milton Steinberg, who was one of the disciples of Mordecai Kaplan. Yeah, and
so it's not a Reconstructionist; it's a conservative Reconstructionist congregation.
Exactly. That's right. And so we had a big celebration for my father's retirement this past weekend. We all traveled out and performed.
The whole band went.
The service, the whole band. The bassist couldn't make it, unfortunately, but we had a fantastic guy from Columbus, Ohio, drive in, learn the music in one day, Andy Kuss. So he joined us, and we played this, and including some songs that are not on the album for the evening, some beautiful tributes.
So it was for the Friday night service.
For the Friday night service.
Were you nervous?
Oh, I was a bit nervous, yeah.
Do you usually get nervous when you perform? Because you don't seem like it.
I get a little nervous when I perform, but this one was different.
Tell me about that.
This was my home synagogue, It's like it's one thing to play for people, who you don't know who are in the audience. When you know that everybody out there knew you when you were 3, that's a different thing. But very quickly, you'd become comfortable, both because I knew that there was a trust in the people there, and they trusted that we'd play some good music, and we were really there just to sort of celebrate the synagogue and to celebrate my parents and my father.
Were you at all nervous about the stakes for your parents? Or you knew that'd be easy?
No, they just had to sit there and watch. Although they had to give their speeches, but they're very good at that.
And then how'd the service go?
It was beautiful. I think they were probably, the sanctuary there fits probably 600. It was 90-some% full.
Whoa, you had 500 people there?
Something like that, yeah.
Wow, that's a lot.
And
were they able to sing along after the first few
yeah, this is the thing about bluegrass. I don't know, we didn't really talk about it before. Jewish music always takes from it the music of the surrounds, right?
Right. Klezmer took
klezmer music. It took from the Balkan, music of Eastern Europe. Just like food too, right? Borscht, that's Eastern European food. Jews who lived in Arabic countries for centuries would play the oud. You couldn't tell that it wasn't Arabic music, except that it was in Hebrew. And so, I think this is just part of that tradition, to take something that is familiar and put it together with something that is old, with respect for the tradition and where the music comes from, what the sentiment is. And so,
right, like a lot of things we consider traditional melodies were actually German drinking songs or Christian songs from Europe. It's just the melody. After you do them for 200 years or 50 years,
tradition.
It becomes what you're used to.
Yeah. So people were tapping their toes, clearly. Somebody said afterwards that they wanted to get up and dance, but they weren't sure that's okay in the synagogue.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
But no, they should have. Of course, they should have.
So people sang along. It went well that Friday night. And then what was the rest of the weekend like?
Well, on Saturday night, there was a big gala celebration,
Did you play again?
We didn't play again. I had to do the roast with my sister that night. So that was a different
How did that go? Oh, a roast?
Yeah.
How did that go?
I think I did okay.
Yeah. And how'd your dad like it and your mom?
They had a great time. It was very poignant. It was funny. It was a lot of laughter, but some tears. And my parents have done a lot of interfaith work in the community there, and so there are representatives from the Muslim community and all the Christian denominational community and African American Black community in Indianapolis. So it was really a celebration of kind of his work within the synagogue, but also within the community.
Was there anything said by him or others that night that stuck with you? It's okay if not.
Yeah, so many things. It's hard to...
What did he talk about?
I think my dad is known for his puns, and so he has a way of putting these groaners, into his speeches, but in a way that sort of somehow highlights a message. And so people groan, but they learn something through it. And so, at the end of the night, as he was finishing his remarks, at the end of his retirement celebration, he flipped through his pages and he says, well, I think I'm running out of material. And everybody stood up to give him an ovation. So it was a beautiful evening.
That is sound really nice. And what a gift from his son. So what's next, David? Are you doing anything with this music? Or we could be singing this in synagogues? You have it coming out on June 9th and people can buy it, right?
On June 9th, it'll be available on the streaming services. It's available on Bandcamp if you want to get the album. I hope to print out the music in a little booklet and see if people are interested in singing it. And two videos are available on YouTube right now, but there will be more coming out. And nothing planned right
what's
now.
What's the thinking on releasing? Why do you do them one by one?
In order?
Like shows the streaming. Sometimes they put a whole season. Sometimes they have you wait one by one. What was you thinking here?
Yeah, I think part of it was that I wanted to wait until this event occurred before I put everything out. So I put a couple videos so people could see what they were going to get when they came. Part of it is just how long it takes to get things to happen, to get
But
things.
You have a bunch of videos done.
I have the videos done, and I'll put those out, fairly soon so that they're all available. Yeah.
Nice.
And we'll see. There's no plans right now to take it to another synagogue, but maybe that will happen.
Are you going to play any more with the band?
I'd love to.
Right.
Yeah.
David Sasso, congratulations on a great job. You did an honor to your parents, but you also kept the Jewish tradition moving forward. Steeped in the tradition and found the music. Why bluegrass, you think? What does bluegrass add? You say you add the flavors of the local music to the traditional music, and that's part of the tradition.
Yeah. Well, I mean, very concretely, I grew up in the Midwest. That's the music of America in some sense, one of the musics of America. And I've been playing it for the past 8 to 10 years. So to merge something that I love with another thing that I love seemed very natural. So that's the personal part. But bluegrass is also a folk music, and the folk ways of Judaism, like any other folk ways, often will elide with one another very well. And so I think bluegrass, in its joy, in the way that you want to tap your toes to it, in the way that it's very easy to quickly pick it up and sing along, makes sense for a kind of service that is meant to be celebratory and poignant and participatory.
So before I let you go, how about we listen to Tzadi Katamar?
Great.
That's my favorite part of Kabbalat Shabbat. Sometimes it's sang kind of wistfully or almost kind of pop. The righteous shall flourish like a palm tree in Lebanon and cedar in Lebanon and thrive. So I picture these trees in Israel, but I also picture our souls in the courtyard of God bearing fruit, spiritual fruit, and that connection between body, soul, and the land. And it's really a beautiful, beautiful hymn. And often, sometimes it sounds very lively, like Tzadi Katamar, Yifrak,
Yes.
Especially on Super Sprat. But other times on Friday night, there's kind of a wistfulness bringing.
Yes.
Let's see how David Sasso reinterpreted on his new album, reinterpreting Kabbalat Shabbat, Sasso V'Simcha. We're going to say goodbye. Thanks to Harry Jost for producing the show on Dateline New Haven, WNHH New Haven's home for community radio. Here's Tzadi Katamar.
יפריחו עוד ינובון בסבב